Evening, everyone. I'm Ellen Pristak. I coordinate the Great Minds Salon. First, I would like to wish everybody a happy and healthy, emphasis on healthy, New Year 2023. It is my pleasure tonight to present to you Gabe Siciliano, who will talk about farming. As for those of you who've participated in the Great Minds Salon before know, I like to claim a connection. And Gabe is a former student of mine at the Jewish Center. I think he's the second great mind to participate as a presenter who was a student of mine. So I claim a little bit of, connection. I'm going to ask everybody to make sure to mute. There will be a Q&A at the end of the program, and you will be able to put your questions in the chat directly to Gabe or to Emily or me, but preferably to Gabe so he can see them directly. And I'm happy to introduce him. From a young age, Gabriel was inculcated with a love of gardening and green growing things by his grandfather, spending much of his childhood with him on the farm and carrying that love with him today. His roots run deep here, and his stewardship of the land reflects that. Though he says he has much to learn as a beginning farmer, he is committed to sustainable stewardship of a legacy for future generations. Gabriel considers it a privilege to grow healthful and delicious food for his community. Abe's Acres Farm has just completed its 6th season. So it's my pleasure to turn the program over to Gabe.
Hi, thanks very kindly for that introduction. I don't know how I feel about being called a great mind, but I'll see if I can live up to that appellation. So just I wanted to reiterate, just to keep things moving along smoothly, if anybody has questions, please save them to the end or put them directly in the chat to me or one of the other hosts so you don't forget. That way we're not stopping every 5 seconds to answer something that someone's asked. I'm going to be talking about a couple of different things tonight. One is a brief history, a fairly narrow scope, but a brief history of farming in Mercer County and central New Jersey as a whole, Jewish farming, which is a pretty interesting history that not a lot of folks know about. Talking a little bit about my farm and what I do. And then I'll be talking about what it means to me to be a Jewish farmer, because, as we all know, our religion and our culture is a fundamentally agrarian one. So without further ado, I'm gonna share my screen. And then let's start it. I have a short PowerPoint, and then we'll open it up. So just bear with me while this is loading. All right. How do I start here? Sorry, I don't host many Zoom meetings, so. All right. So we're going to be talking a little bit about Jewish farming in Mercer County. That's a brief history. This is going to be kind of a 3-part section here. So at first, I'd like to talk about Roosevelt, where a lot of my family is from. It was formerly called Jersey Homesteads. It was incorporated on the 29th of May, 1937. Emergency anti-poverty initiatives, were instituted by the New Deal. And one of those initiatives were the founding of 99 cooperative communities across the country, which was authorized by the National Industrial Recovery Act. They created the Division of Subsistence Homesteads, the purpose of which was to decentralize industry from congested cities and enable workers to kind of improve their standards of living through the help of subsistence agriculture. Roosevelt, New Jersey, again, then called Jersey Homesteads, which is right over in Millstone, which is now technically part of Millstone and right down the road from my farm, was the only community planned as an agro-industrial cooperative, which included a farm, a factory, and retail stores. And it is the first and only secular Jewish commune founded by the US government. It was kind of like an American kibbutz in many ways. It was founded specifically for urban Jewish garment workers from New York City, many of whom were committed and avowed socialists, like my great-grandfather, Israel Notterman, whose family was amongst the first busload of settlers down from New York. So let's see. Yeah, it was about 500 acres of the 1,200-acre tract of land that was designated for the settlement, which would be used for farming. The remaining portion for 200 houses on half-acre plots, each with its own garden, a community school, a factory, a poultry yard, and then water treatment and sewage plants. The International Ladies Garment Workers Union agreed that the factory would be a new cooperative run by the settlers so that no union jobs would be taken away from New York. The factory opened in 1936. The trade name for its products was Tripod, signifying the triple cooperative, factory, farm, retail. And the garment factory failed within 2 years because of the vagaries of capitalism and delays in housing construction, and then the shortage of workers kind of was just a cascade. Proving to be no more economically successful than the factory, the settlement's ag co-op ceased operations in 1940, but the individual subsistence farms and garden plots continued. Despite that, all these conflicts and hardships, the residents of the borough managed to build a very close-knit community, and that carries down to today. Roosevelt is one of the most tightly knit communities in New Jersey that I know of, and fun fact, has the best elementary school in New Jersey by means of test scores. So we're going to go through and look at some photographs, and I'll describe a little bit more about the town. This is a photograph of Roosevelt from the air in the year of its founding. In the center, you can see the garment factory building, and you can see the houses behind it, each house with a garden plot, and then the communal farm space right in the middle. And then in the back, you can see in the top left-hand corner, there is, you can see the poultry operation. And again, well, if down over here to the left, if you went about 500 yards further down the road, you'd find my family's homestead. This is the Jersey Homesteads Historic District sign that still graces the entrance to Roosevelt today, as well as one of those lovely little historical plaques that gives a little bit more information about the town that's near the memorial statue for Franklin Delano Roosevelt. The Library of Congress has a lot of resources about this operation and a lot of really, really excellent photographs. This was the garment factory at the height of its operations in the town. This was, you can see this is a construction of the poultry operation as it was getting started. There are a couple of mobile chicken coops in the background there. We'll be talking more about poultry coops, poultry co-ops in the next section of the presentation. All the retail businesses in town were run by local residents to keep it within the community. This is Sam Berg's grocery store that he ran out of his garage and then opened up a storefront. And he made sure that all of the residents of the town were able to get their kosher meats in from New York to supplement what they slaughtered on the farm and in the community itself. Roosevelt is known architecturally for its very unique cinder block houses. This is one of the original houses shortly after it was finished. They're single floor dwellings. They are very unique. They're difficult to heat in the winter, difficult to cool in the summer. But a lot of people find them, a lot of people have a lot of nostalgic memory associated with them. The next slide is what Roosevelt looks like today. There's a lot more tree cover. The town otherwise looks largely the same. And this is the Roosevelt Synagogue, which was built at the same time. It was an Orthodox synagogue, despite the fact that the community was secular, but they served the community's needs and the needs of some other Orthodox communities that were located nearby in Prineville and between Roosevelt and Lakewood. And I'd also like to just take a brief second. This isn't germane to farming, but Roosevelt ended up being somewhat of an artist's colony and still is today. In 1936, the artist Ben Shahn was invited to paint a mural on the wall of the school depicting the founding of Jersey homesteads. The mural is, this is the slide of the mural. You can see going from left to right, it tells the story of Jewish immigrants arriving from the old country. You can see Albert Einstein painted right there. He was actually present for the incorporation of the town and was on the board initially, the planning board. And you can see garment workers all the way moving down to planning the town, moving out of the city, building the town, and constructing an agricultural cooperative. And following Ben Shahn, who settled permanently in the town, a number of other artists, including a couple of chair of the Pratt Institute's different departments, Jacob Landau, Gregorio Prestipino, the graphic artist David Martin, and then his son, Stephen Martin, a couple of well-known photographers. And to this day, Roosevelt is still a very quirky little artist's enclave. And if you drive around town, you'll see all kinds of weird sculptures and art installations. It's really quite a pleasant place. Yeah, it's it's a little known story about the only American kibbutz that was funded by the United States government on United soil. Like I said, it fell to the vagaries of capitalism and the supply chain, but they did their best. So moving on, I'd like to talk a little bit about poultry co-ops in New Jersey. And this is actually very interesting. Not a lot of people know about how deeply embedded Jews and Jewish farmers were, not only in poultry farming in New Jersey, but to the poultry industry in the United States as it was ramping up in the mid-20th century as a whole. So settlement in the area, in what became this sort of like conclave of poultry farms, began around World War I. There were 4 waves of settlers, Jewish settlers to central New Jersey, Jewish farming settlers, I should say. The first were Eastern Europeans who otherwise, some of who otherwise had generally stayed in the slums of New York and had their children schooled there in early years and then moved to New Jersey. I'll talk about Abraham Felcher and my farm's namesake. He was amongst that first wave. The second wave consisted mainly of those who wanted to flee the tenements of New York in the interwar period. The third migration came in the 30s, fleeing German oppression in the lead up to World War II. And then the fourth wave were displaced persons who arrived after the Second World War, a lot of whom were concentration camp survivors needing a place in which to heal from their ordeal and build new lives. Those folks, and my other great grandfather was one of those. We'll talk about him as well. They were used to backbreaking work and were made very, very good farmers and made a good living for themselves. There were 1,200 farms in and around South Central New Jersey, owned and operated by Jews farming poultry at the peak in the 1950s. 16 million chickens and 240 million eggs a year. And at that time, this was the egg capital of the United States before that industry moved out west. Jewish farmers in New Jersey were at the forefront of that. And it wasn't, to be clear, that wasn't one huge farm encompassing all of the land in central New Jersey. That was thousands of small little farms all selling their stuff through agricultural cooperatives. That small scale poultry farming and thus the greater Jewish farming community along with it began to decline by the 60s as a result of the overproduction of eggs, the withdrawal of government price supports for eggs, and then the high price of feed, and then the consolidation into corporate farming. That kind of went by the wayside. At the time in the post-war period, coming into the 60s, suburban sprawl was spreading out from Philadelphia and New York, and it was worth a lot more to some folks to sell their land to developers rather than to continue to farm it. And that trend continues to this day. I mean, I'm sure everyone here can remember even 10, 15, 20 years ago, there were a lot more farms in central New Jersey. Let's see. Farmingdale was kind of like the central like the central like poultry cooperative zone in New Jersey. Initially, the area mostly produced produce. Then they moved to livestock, and the local Jewish Agricultural Society saw that they needed a new product because they weren't really selling a lot. So they suggested poultry. That area in particular struck it rich over a period in the poultry and egg business. That's really where it came to be. There was a general organization of an egg cooperative that included a corridor of egg farmers along Route 130. If anybody's familiar with the area on Route 130 between Heightstown and going out towards Trenton, there are a lot of garden centers now. All of that used to be egg farms and poultry farms. We'll see some slides in a couple of minutes of those. So those co-op members shared farming knowledge, they shared labor, they marketed their eggs and poultry together. They even shared equipment when they needed to. They were very much in it together. My great-grandfather, Harry Silver, my great-grandmother's second husband, was a displaced person from Belarusia who had fled the Einsatzgruppen in there and lost his family in the war and started a second family here. And he was an egg farmer in this area. A lot of the farms looked exactly like this. You see the chicken coop in the background. They're usually made of terracotta. You can still see a few old ones like this on back roads in and around 130. And each farm generally had between 5 and 15,000 chickens. Sounds like a lot, but they really don't take up too much space. This was Ehrlich's Poultry Farm, which is located approximately where Timothy's Garden Center is on Route 130 now. This is pretty representative of what that area looked like in the 50s and 60s. All right, and now I want to talk about something very, very interesting, the Hechelitz Farm, which my family used to actually own what used to be the Hechelitz Farm, and was sold to the township of East Windsor. It was founded in 1941 by Hashomer Hatzair, which was an organization in the United States during the 20s that existed to prepare its members to make Aliyah, move to Palestine, what was Palestine at the time, and establish kibbutzim. It was basically a training farm, which would enable members to adapt to the physical labor, which a lot of these people did not grow up doing that kind of physical labor, acquire farm skills on the one hand, and cultivate the kind of social relationships and collective work ethic that they'd need in order to work on a kibbutz in a place where, you know, they would give all their property over to the kibbutz and raise children communally and that sort of thing. It was 200 acres. It was 208 acres, 48 of which were apple orchards. They did produce, fruit, livestock, and poultry. It was a really diversified operation. And they had a really successful poultry operation that led to a metal factory for production of, hang on, there we go, for production of mobile chicken coops, which were what allowed the egg cooperative several miles away on 130 to be such a powerhouse of egg production. And I'm going to show you a couple photographs of those. This is a photograph of the sign, which was right down the road on Feldscher, the Hechelitz Farm. They produced, this is the Hechelitz from above. Most of these buildings are still extant. Over in the top right-hand corner, going where you see those power lines going off towards the road. If you turn left, you'll be where I am sitting right now. You can see the main communal housing building, the cafeteria. Down over to the left, there was the livestock barn, the gymnasium, and the metalworking factory over in the right over here. They had a huge contract to produce tomatoes for the Campbell's Soup Company. They were one of the largest tomato growers for soup that went into Campbell's tomatoes, soup cans during that part of the century, which I think is pretty cool. They, like I said, were very, very good at egg production and really struck it rich there. to the point where they were, here's a couple more workers out in the field, harvesting potatoes. They milked their own cows, they raised their own meat. They tried to be as self-sufficient as possible in order to really reduce off-farm inputs in order to develop the best kind of skills they could. Coming into kibbutzim in Israel. Let's see, next slide. These two folks, Shosh and Yaakov Dorfman, were the co-founders of Kibbutz Ein Dor, which is in the Lower Galilee in northern Israel. I've been there. It's a very beautiful place, and it has its roots right here in New Jersey. And here's a picture from the metalworking factory. This kind of went along with, like, you know, the agro-industrial idea of kibbutzim. It was pretty successful. All right, we're moving on to, yes. So they practiced a lot of, you know, the Israeli traditions of folk dancing on the weekends. Their parties were so loud that they could be heard from miles around. So my mother and my uncle, as well as all of their childhood friends, remember very fondly hearing the music coming from the hechelotz over the hill, and then walking the 1.5 miles over the fields to join the dancing every week, which I imagine was delightful. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of my farm, and then I'm going to move into talking about what our farm is today. So Feldshire Road is where the farm is located now. It was named for my great-grandfather, Abraham Feldscher, who moved to the United States in 1921 from Ukraine, fleeing a series of pogroms, as well as the Russian Civil War and the Russian Revolution and the Ukrainian Civil War. He moved to Brooklyn, started a dry goods business, but as a Jew in his part of Ukraine, he was not allowed to own land, let alone farm it. And that was always his dream, was to be a landowner like the kulaks above him. So he moved to New Jersey in 1933, purchased the farmhouse, and started farming. That was shortly after my grandmother and my second great aunt were born. He grew potatoes and corn, and he raised chickens as well, trying to break into the poultry co-op business. If you'll notice, he moved to the farm. He bought the farm in 1933, immediately before the Depression, which, as soon as it hit, killed the agricultural business for him. So he started running the farm as a boarding house, and then as a subsistence farm to keep his family and community fed during those hard times. At that time, the family was my great-grandfather Abraham, my great-grandmother Tanya, and their daughters Rebecca, my grandmother Jeanette, who was actually born in Belgium on the way over from Ukraine, and Esther, my great aunt, who now lives in Reston, Virginia. My grandmother Rebecca and her husband Joseph, remember, his family came from Roosevelt, which was right down the road. They had a fun little courtship where they'd walk the 1.5 miles back and forth to see each other out in the boondocks of New Jersey. It's very cute. They bought the farm from her father in 1956. My grandfather was a professor at Princeton University. He taught in the psychology department. He taught during the academic year, farmed in the summer, and was referred to by his friends and colleagues as a true gentleman farmer. As the family, like the original Nottermans on the farm, as they stand, my great aunt Jeanette, may her memory be a blessing, passed in 98. My grandmother Rebecca will be 98 in March. She still lives on the farm in the house that she grew up in. And my great aunt Esther is 93, and she lives, as I said, in Reston, Virginia. Since that purchase in 56, we've grown potatoes and winter rye for a couple of decades, then leased the land to a grower who grew Chinese vegetables for markets in Manhattan, using mostly bok choy, yu choy, tatsoi, gailan, things like this. And I'll move on and show some photographs. This is my grandfather Joseph, sometime in the mid 60s. God, he was handsome. the cultivating his crops. Those are rows of potatoes out in the fields. And these are my mother, my uncle, and a brood of the cousins sometime around that time. Their summer job was selling corn that was grown on the farm. We still have that corn sign, says corn 40 cents a dozen, sitting in one of the barns. And then if you take note in the left hand of this photograph of that tractor, we'll be coming back to that tractor later. I still use that tractor every day. It was purchased in 1947. All right. So Abe's Acres Farm, as it stands today, it is named for my great-grandfather to carry his dream of farming alive. I grow on 8 intensely cultivated acres on the farm. That means I use every available square inch of that space and turn it over during the year, so that at no point during the year is any part of that land not either in active production or under cover crop. I grow 37 individual vegetable crops, so we're a very diversified operation. We do 3 weekly farmers markets during the season. We have a vegetable CSA share, more on that later. And our principles, the type of growing we do is called regenerative agriculture, which goes beyond organic. And I'll explain what that means. There are a few principles to regenerative agriculture. So it's really a system that seeks to replicate natural systems rather than trying to make nature work, rather than trying to force nature to do what you want, trying to work in concert with it. And instead of reverse and sort of degrading soil, building soil health. So the paradigm is to build the health of the soil and build the health of the land over time, increase carbon levels in the soil, sequester that out of the air, increase organic matter, increase biodiversity in and around your fields and in the soil itself. There are 5 core principles. Minimal tillage to prevent soil erosion and build soil structure. So you till the soil as little as possible and physically break it as little as possible. Keep crop residues on the soil. We don't burn anything or blow it off. Maintain living roots at all times, meaning if, like I said, if it's not actively being grown on for production, there is a cover crop in place. So planting a number of different crops, crop diversity. I grow 37 different crops and a number of different cover crops, and we rotate those crops throughout the year and from year to year. And we integrate livestock into the operation, which adds manure, terminates cover crops, and allows us to reduce off-farm inputs. The difference between what I do and what one would generally consider organic is organic standards generally only care about whether or not you're using prohibited substances in your farm. There isn't really a metric for soil health or soil management or tillage practices, which is where the core of soil health comes from. Again, our principle is feed and care for the soil and steward that soil for the next generation, because I am ephemeral. The soil is there forever. Someone else will be farming it after me, rather than doing whatever I need to do to the plants to get those plants to produce what I want them. So I want to talk a little bit about climate change adaptations, because we'll see some of that in the next slides. Climate change is ravaging agriculture and our planet. Realistically, there's not much we can do to stop it at this point, but there's a lot we can do to adapt to it and adapt our growing practices to continue to be able to feed people healthful produce and care for the land. So a lot of that is switching to covered growing spaces. So like what are called high tunnels and caterpillar tunnels, essentially a greenhouse that's put up over a field. You're still growing in the ground, but you cover it so you can control the precipitation. Stormwater management, as weather events become more and more extreme, precipitation is a problem. Either there's way too much at one time or the course of the season, or not enough. Last year was a drought, one of the worst droughts in living memory. Year before that, we got as much rain as Costa Rica. So we have to be able to adapt to those things and manage stormwater as it comes. Crop diversity. So if something fails, something else can take its place. So this past season, all of my cucumbers did terribly. It was a terrible year for cucumbers over the entire state, but I don't just grow cucumbers. So we did okay. And developing and switching to more heat tolerant varieties of crops. As the summers get hotter and hotter, we need to be able to adapt to that. We'll look at some fun photographs. There we go. This is an overhead shot of one of our fields. As you can see, everything is very densely packed. On the bottom right, you can see an above shot of what's called a caterpillar tunnel. These are tunnels that are put up over crops to keep the rain off, so we can we can keep disease under control and sort of control precipitation. We use mostly drip irrigation, which was an Israeli invention. I believe not a lot of people know this. All drip irrigation the world over comes from Israeli patents. And here's a couple of beautiful photos of delicious produce that we sell at our markets. There's one of our barn cats who follows us around in the field all the time and makes a nuisance out of himself. This is garlic, one of my favorite crops to grow, curing in the barn. Spinach in one of the high tunnels. That's me holding our newest specialty crop. We grow ginger on the farm. It's a really, really delicious crop. It's in the ground for 9 months, but it's oh so good, and it's quite lucrative too. This is what's called a high tunnel. Like I said, it's a greenhouse that we grow directly in the ground in. In the winter time, this photo was taken a couple weeks ago. It allows us to grow during the winter and keep things from freezing. So we mostly grow greens in there, greens and roots. And in the summer, that's me stringing up tomato plants in late April, early May. We keep the precipitation off of our high value crops like tomatoes in order to allow them to survive the season, whether or not we're getting too much or too little water. We also do a lot of value-added products. It's a great way to preserve the harvest. We do sauces, salsas, pickles, that kind of stuff. All of it's made entirely with produce from the farm. And all of it's, I'm quite proud of all of it, especially the tomato sauces. And this is my baby cousin Jonas, playing around on that tractor you saw a few slides ago, that generations of my family have been using to cultivate our land, and generations more will continue to. He's the next generation, and we start them young at Abe's Acres on the Notterman farm. When he was an infant, he spent most of his days while his mother was working with me, seeding in the greenhouse, working in the fields, generally getting dirty, building up his immune system and getting a taste for good local produce. And that tractor in particular is very special to me. I drove, as an anecdote, it is the first vehicle I ever drove. It's the first vehicle my mother ever drove, the first vehicle any of my cousins and I ever drove. When I was 3, I used to sit on that seat and my feet wouldn't even reach the drive column where his feet are. Now I use it for cultivating every day. So, and with that, I'd like to talk about Judaism as an agrarian religion and some of the traditions and aspects of that religion that take on new meanings and new contexts when you are actively farming for a living and to feed yourself and your family. So, Judaism itself is, like I said, is an agrarian religion. Many of our holidays and festivals and traditions focus around agriculture, agricultural practice, and the turning of the seasons. So Sukkot, the harvest festival, of course, Shemitah, which is, the lying fallow every 7 years. You have to lead your, it's on the 7th year, the fields rest, just like we rest on the 7th day. That's actually really interesting. That's good farming practice in order to allow your fields to recover their organic matter from year to year. And that's something letting fields lie fallow under cover crop is something I do on a much sooner than 7-year basis. But that particular tradition has its underpinnings in good agricultural practice. The traditions of Tu B'Shvat, and gleaning, also are a lot of things that we focus on. But in particular, the concept of kashrut, for example. Kashrut means, proper or propriety, right? And in a modern context, we often think about meat provenance and how meat is slaughtered and the mixing of dairy and meat. But for me, as a farmer, propriety in the context of kashrut also includes how you treat the land, right? So a lot of kashrut is about respect for food, respect for animals, and respect for agriculture and where things come from, because they're aspects of the divine that are given to us for our own sustenance. Or at least not, I should say, not given to us, but entrusted to our care. If you're treating agriculture as something other than like land and soil focused, it's not proper, it's not kosher. It goes back to the concept of stewardship of the land, right? We don't own the land, we just take care of it for the next generation. And a lot of Jewish agricultural practice in the Mishnah focuses on that idea of like, you don't own it, you just take care of it. If we take care of the land with propriety, not only are our traditions respected, but the land continues to be productive for us. And now I'd like to talk a little bit about what is arguably our holiest and most central tradition, Shabbos. And caveat, I am not a learned man. I am a layman. Take all of this with a grain of salt. These are just my opinions. If you have more specific questions about halachos and how farming and halachos go together, talk to the rabbi, right? But that being said, Shabbos, like a weekly rest period, really takes on new meaning and significance if you're an active farmer. You know, farming has a lot of risks in the modern day, but for the ancient Hebrews, it wasn't a business, it was survival. This was how you kept yourself and your community and your family alive. You have a limited amount of time during the growing season to grow what you need in order to survive. So the question is, why would you spend one day out of 7 resting and not working to keep yourself and your family alive? I can tell you, running a farm, there is never not work to do. It's very easy, even in a modern context, to lose oneself in that work, to lose your connection to your family, to lose yourself in pursuit of a more productive, higher yielding farm. And farmers, by and large, burn themselves out on a yearly basis and then just keep doing it again and again and again. And rest and time spent with your community away from work is just as critical to the work as the work itself, to survival and to a fulfilling life. So, you know, we're told in the Torah to remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. Why are we told to remember this? From my perspective, it's really easy to forget when there is so much work to do. Like, you know, even outside of the religious significance and prescription, a weekly tradition of rest, a strictly followed weekly tradition of rest, that mindful practice is absolutely critical, I would argue, for a farmer to be successful in every area of their life. That work loses its meaning and it becomes that much harder and that much more difficult if you aren't taking that weekly rest period. You know, in a modern context, Jews have like a really visceral understanding of like, you know, the aspect of Shabbos rest, but a lot of that gets lost, I feel like, in the minutia of halachos about like, you know, light switches and cooking and what counts as work and what doesn't count as work. Where to me, and you know, that's all meaningful, but to me, the Sabbath is a day where I tell myself, I will not work today on the farm. Nothing will die, like beyond, nothing will die on the farm if I'm not working every single second of every day. Of course, I take care of things at their bare minimum, but that weekly rest and rejuvenation period I've found over the years running my own farm is something that is necessary for me to stay sane and me to stay human. And being a Jewish farmer gives one an appreciation for what Shabbos must have meant to our ancestors, our ancient ancestors, and even our recent ancestors in living memory. In the old country, where farming and raising your own food was necessary for survival. And you know, it like I said, like Shabbos takes on that kind of new meaning and significance, and is something that a tradition I've held very near and dear to my heart since I was a child. But since I've started farming, it means more to me and in different ways. Let's see what's next. All right, so back to CSA. So this is a shameless business plug. Community supported agriculture. It's a system of food production that directly connects farmers to consumers. So you buy a share of the farm, you pay up front at the beginning of the year, and you get either a box delivered to you, or you come and get your crops from us at market and pick and choose what you want. You receive a portion as they're harvested. It reduces cash flow uncertainty for farmers. it front loads our business, which is, gives us cash at the beginning of the season, which is when it's the most, which is when we spend the most money. And it increases value for eaters because, you spend all that money at the beginning of the season. By the time I'm overflowing with tomatoes in late July, I'm just going to give you more than you paid for. I don't care. Take a whole bushel. Just you've already paid for it. It's yours. You can check out our website for more info and to sign up. We offer a couple of different options in terms of box share sizes, as well as a box share that's in concert with a couple of other local farms. So you get eggs, dairy, products, our vegetables, a loaf of bread, all kinds of stuff in one place. I'm going to post that link in the chat. And feel free to ask me any questions you have about it. All right, so I want to read a quote from Dr. Joseph Notterman, my late grandfather, from his memoirs on farming. It's out here, but it's something that I think about every day of my life, so I'm going to read it to you. One develops a self-discipline that comes with having to do things when it's the time to do them. Planting can't be put off, neither can cultivating nor weeding. You learn to keep going when you'd much rather not, and to accept an occasional poor result at the end of the season despite your best efforts. You also learn to take justifiable pride when you walk around and see the ripening of your vegetables and the beauty of your flower beds. In short, for me, gardening is a metaphor for life. And I will close the didactic portion of my presentation with this delightful photograph of my grandfather and I standing in the exact same place, 40 years apart. The field behind me and the field behind him is the field that I grow in now. And it's my privilege and pleasure to steward my family's land for the next generation of my family and to feed my community. Yeah, and that's that. I'm going to, if it's all right with the other hosts, stop sharing my screen now. Or actually, no, you know what? I'm actually, and you know what? I'm actually going to leave that open so I can continue to look at this awesome photo.
Yeah.
But I'm now going to, while I have it in my head. Oh, dang. Well, I'm just going to share my website. The CSA page is easy to find. It's right there. And that's right in the chat. Abe's right. Whoops. That's a mistake. Abe's Acres. Sorry, Butterfingers. AbesAkersFarm.com. And with that, I'm happy to take questions, hear other people's thoughts, their opinions on what gardening and farming means to them in a Jewish context. And I'll answer questions. All right, so the first question I see, and I think there's a hand raising feature on Zoom if you want to speak up rather than type, unless I miss my guess. But so this first question is from Jennifer. Is there a difference in results or otherwise between using horses or cattle to improve soil with their manure? We don't use cattle on our farm. We use chickens and poultry, but yes, there is a difference. So cattle are more easily rotationally grazed in a pattern that mimics natural, grazing patterns of livestock. Meaning, so rotational grazing means you have one way to do it is you have a central location where there's a water source, and then you have it looks kind of like a pie chart or a chore wheel of like sections of grazing in a field where the animals are put and rotated every 2 weeks. And they go around the clock like this. So they eat, they eat their forage, they fertilize that part of the field, and then they move on to the next one to allow that to recuperate over time. Horses don't do so well with that because horses are bred to move around and work, right? And despite the fact that they're herd animals, they still need a lot of supplemental feed, whereas it is possible to exclusively raise cattle on pasture and not feed them any grain whatsoever, especially if you're looking to reduce our farm inputs and produce grass-fed and grass-finished meat, which is, studies show, much healthier for you. Shoshana says that she loves the way I look at Shabbat. Thank you. I think about it quite a lot, at least once a week. All right. let's see, any more questions, comments?
I have a question here from Heidi Joseph. She
Hi,
asked,
Heidi.
how did you get involved with farming? Was it what you always wanted and expected to do?
Good question. Okay. So no, it is not. I grew up in a family of doctors, lawyers, and academics. And you all, we're all. I'm presuming everyone here is Jewish. We all know that story. Well, if you're not going to medical school, at least you're going to get a PhD, right? I mean, that's kind of what you're going to do, or you're going to go to law school at the very least. So, I was studying at Brandeis University when my grandfather died in the summer of 2013. Now, my grandfather, as I mentioned, we were very, very close when I was growing up and remained close for the remainder of his life. He was one of the few members of my family who never made me feel like I was expected to do a specific thing. He only ever cared whether I and the rest of his grandchildren were enjoying what we did and were good at what we did, whatever it was. And he was the most academically accomplished of all of us, and yet also the most humble. He grew up as a sharecropper, and came from very humble beginnings. So when he died, it was the first real loss I'd ever experienced, at least to that extent. And I took deep and personal inventory of what I wanted from my life versus what I thought I was expected to do. The things on my list of things that were fulfilling were being outside, growing stuff, building things, not having to specialize in any one academic field to the exclusion of all others, because my interests are very wide ranging. And farming kind of ticked all the boxes. And on top of that, I was also really blessed to have land access, which is the main hurdle towards getting into farming. So I just talked to a few people who were already in the business. They said, you can go to school for this, or what's probably better is you just apprentice yourself to a grower, see if you can physically hack the work, and go from there. So I did. I apprenticed at Quail Hill Farm on the east end of Long Island for a full season, fell in love with it, moved back to New Jersey, apprenticed at another farm in Pennington for a while, and then decided that if I wasn't going to start my business then, I was never going to do it, and just continue to tell myself I had more to learn. So here I am. I'm still learning. I think anyone who has been farming less than 10 years is a beginning farmer. After that, you kind of know what you're doing. But at this point, I am still very much at the beginning of my journey. I see there's a couple questions I'd like to answer from Nicole, and then one more from Shoshana. No, we don't only sell through CSA. We do retail markets during the season. We have 3 of them. We do the Yardley Farmers Market, the Borden on Saturdays, the Bordentown Farmers Market on Sundays, and the Asbury Park Farmers Market also on Sundays. And in the wintertime, we do Yardley and Asbury Park every first and third weekend of the month on those same days. All of this is on our website, which is in the chat. You can check it out and come see me. I'll be at Yardley day after tomorrow. Aren't there some communal farms today? Yes, there are. None in central New Jersey that I'm aware of. There's a couple in North Jersey. There are quite a few in the Hudson Valley. But very few of them are secular. Most of them are religious or focused on religious aspects of Judaism to one extent or another, whether it's Reconstructionist or Orthodox or Reform or somewhere in between. As I'm not aware of any secular Jewish agricultural cooperatives in the Northeast United States. If I'm wrong about that, please tell me. I'd love to talk to them. And next question, are there any enterprises that I started and decided to abandon? Yes, strawberries. Screw that. I hate growing strawberries. They're really profitable, but they're just so annoying to pick, especially when they're ripe. I briefly considered doing pick your own, but once you start getting people randomly showing up at your grandma's house on off days asking if they can pick stuff and like, hey, can my kid use the bathroom? Ooh, what's in this barn? Hey, is that a gun? Why is that? like we have predators and stuff, but like, yeah, it was more trouble than it was worth. So you'll actually notice, I haven't given out my physical address. I mean, it's Feldsher Road, but whatever. But my physical address is nowhere on my website or any of my social media. And yet still, people still show up with a picnic basket and say, hi, where can I put my stuff? Because people think of farms as businesses, whereas like, public parks rather than businesses and home and, homes. In the early days, in farming in New Jersey, how did those Jewish farmers afford purchasing the farmland? What percentage of the farms were kibbutz style versus privately owned? Okay, so a lot of farmland. So keep in mind, farmland in New Jersey was much, much cheaper in the 20s and in like the teens, 20s, and 30s than it is today. That being said, larger tracts of land were more expensive. And it was a lot of communities pulling their resources or relying on institutions like the Jewish Agricultural Society or settlement groups that were funded by groups in Palestine or by, wealthier backers who were Zionists but didn't really want to lift a finger. And then there were folks like my great-grandpa Abraham who came to this country in 1921 and spent the next 10 years saving that money up to purchase his first parcel of land. And as I said, he did that by running a dry goods business in Brooklyn. Next is Louis has a comment. What is your comment?
Actually, that's me. I'm Lynn.
Okay.
It's my husband's
hi, Lynn.
site name. But
Got it.
anyway, just a very very brief story.
Sure.
A number of years ago, my daughter was with several non-Jewish friends. One of them had just moved into a house in Roosevelt, New Jersey, and they were poking around and they were opening drawers and doors. And one of them said, oh, there's a piece of tape here in this drawer with the letter M. And look, in this drawer, there's a tape with the letter D. What the heck could that mean? Of course, my daughter was the only one who knew that that was the silverware drawer for meat and dairy. But that was my first inkling that Roosevelt had been or was or is an area that attracted lots of Jewish people. So, but
it was exclusively Jewish at the beginning.
Yeah. So this was fascinating, Gabe. I applaud you for the work you're doing, not only with your Judaism in mind, but sustainable farming is so critical. Everybody should be doing what you're doing, and I really applaud you for it. Thank you for a great presentation.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That really means a lot. Thank you. So moving on down this list, any thoughts about vertical farming? Yes, it's useful in a very specific context. It's useful in urban areas. It has the potential to be useful in urban areas where there are food deserts, where there isn't really access to fresh produce. There are some vertical farming operations in Hoboken, in Newark, and maybe Jersey City now. I'm not sure. I think Arrow Farms might have expanded to Jersey City. So in order to reduce carbon emissions and get food into places where it needs to be. Unfortunately, because we live in a capitalist hellscape, what ends up happening is those greens get cut and sold at a premium in Whole Foods markets in and around Manhattan, rather than distributed and subsidized to their local communities where people only have the option of going to KFC or McDonald's to eat. Vertical farming where I am would be a little bit silly, because it's pretty resource intensive and reliant on infrastructure that I don't have, and it's just more efficient to grow in a field. So I think vertical farming has potential. It is not seeing that potential right now because it's mostly being used for profit and just growing high value crops like greens for rich people who don't need it. But that is my thought. Do I do I have employees or am I managing the field solo? Sorry for all the questions you were. Oh, cool. Don't apologize. That's awesome. Drop me a line afterwards. I'd love to chat because obviously. So good question. My first 3 years I was solo, and that is what I am talking about when the idea of like rest as a strict practice like became something I started to think about, because I didn't my first 3 years I didn't take a day off for the 8-month growing season. I didn't take a day off last year either, but that was for different reasons. And that's just not sustainable. I mean, it's just not. Like, you can't do that to yourself and still be a human being. And the relationships in your life will degrade and your family will just stop talking to you, and yeah, all that. So yes, I do have employees now. I think it's weird because I'm just some schmuck. Like, why should I have any authority? But like, I can't physically do all the work all myself. So I have 3 full-time employees during the season, and then some part-time workers for harvest days and pack out, and then like a rotating cast of people at markets. And then I routinely get volunteers who come in and out. And those volunteers are usually stick around for like 2 or 3 days before they realize what the work actually entails. And they say, thanks for the experience. Bye. This is actually really hard. But I'm always happy for people to come out to the farm and see what it's like. Did what Lynn said. Thank you. All right. Are there any questions that I haven't seen, or any questions that anyone wants to ask, either by voice or in the chat?
Hi, this is Heidi. Can I just ask about your prepared foods that you have, or the sauces that you have? Do you make all
Sure.
of that yourself?
No, I do not. So those are called value-added products. And until very recently, New Jersey did not have cottage industry laws. So all of that needed to be done in a certified commercial kitchen space, which I do not have. You can rent. There's actually a couple really cool businesses, one of them which is in Trenton called Cherry Street Kitchen, where you can rent commercial kitchen space and do the processing yourself. But as I previously mentioned, I am a farmer. I don't have time for that. So I hire that out. I develop the recipes myself. I've developed all of them myself, and then I hire them out to different places. So I use a co-packer in Pennsylvania called Bauman's Family Cannery for my sauce, tomato sauces, salsas, and fruit butters. There is a very nice gentleman who is a Methodist pastor in Hillsborough, who has a certified kitchen in his church, who does my hot sauce. His name's Bob rules. And then there's a guy in Dayton whose name is Frank Schlesinger. 3 guesses what his religion is. He's very good at making pickles. So once I've developed my pickle recipes, I give them to Pickle Frank, and then Pickle Frank does all my pickle processing. So yeah, that is the answer. I would dearly love for there to be like an agricultural cooperative, like packing house in New Jersey, but nobody with both the wherewithal and the upfront capital has made that happen yet. And I don't have $2.5 million to spend on a food production facility, and I don't have the wherewithal to like fill out the appropriate grant paperwork to try and get a SARE grant from the government. If anybody in this chat is good at grant writing, please call me. So yeah.
Gabe, it's Ellen. So your products are available for purchase at your different venues in Yardley and Bordentown, where you mentioned there's no
Correct.
farm store at your farm.
If you want to come buy stuff at the farm, contact me and then come.
Okay.
Like I said, on purpose, we do not have a farm store on the property because a lot of my family still lives there. There's a lot of liability issues. I don't super
Sure.
love people walking up to my house and asking me if they can use my bathroom at like weird times of day. And it's just, it really, a lot of it just boils down to like safety issues. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
There's heavy equipment everywhere. There's, it's locked up, but there's still a shotgun in the barn for like coyotes and stuff. It's just not worth it. CSA pickup. There's a number of different pickup options. Thank you, Nicole. I appreciate this. Thank you. There's a pickup point in Princeton, actually at my parents' house near the Riverside School. Used to be at the bakery that does our bread for our CSA, but the landlord got annoying about it. So whatever. You can pick up directly from the farm. You can pick up from any of our market locations. And if you're within a 10-mile radius of the farm, delivery is free. If you're further out than that, there's a commensurate delivery fee per mile. It's like 58 cents or something per mile.
And all this information is on your website.
All of it. Yep.
Great. Sandy Rabinowitz, I think, has a question. Sandy, unmute.
Is your grandmother Becky Notterman?
Yes.
Okay. She was part of one of the circles that my husband and I were part of. We knew a lot of young doctors in town at that time.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. She was, so to be, yeah, my grandmother was a pediatrician.
Yes.
So I get, let me put it this way. I leverage that connection a lot. It's gotten me out of a lot of traffic tickets in Hightstown. So, but yes, Rebecca Notterman is alive and well. She is no longer practicing. As I said, she is nearly 100 years old, but she lives
Oh,
at
I didn't know
home.
she was still alive.
Oh yeah, she's 98. She lives at home. I or another family member eats lunch with her every day. She took care of us for our entire lives. We take care of her in her twilight years.
Oh, that's lovely. Well, thank you for a very interesting evening.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
Could you tell us what your website is?
It is www.abesacresfarm.com. I put it in the chat, and I am going to put it in the chat one more time. There we go.
Wait.
Oh, that was directly. Hang on. That was a direct message. I'm sorry. I am not. I have hosted a Zoom session 0 times before, so forgive me. There it is. That's sent to everybody.
Okay.
No, I see there's another. Robin is not Rebecca's daughter. Robin is Rebecca's daughter-in-law. Abby is Rebecca's daughter. That's my mom. And then her brother is Dan, who is married to Robin. And all of whom are Dr. Notterman. So it gets like really confusing. And frankly it's another good reason I didn't go to medical school, because I would have just added to that.
Your mother is not doctor, just saying.
Oh, hey, Mom. Technically, you are.
Well, only in England.
You have a JD. That's a doctor.
You're funny.
Yeah. Thanks, Mom.
So I have another question. Obviously,
What's
you
up?
learned so much from your family about farming and doing all the, working at other farms. But
Yeah.
farming is also a science. And did you
Yes.
have any formal science education about, did you take classes? How did you learn so much? Was it just through experience?
About farming?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much
I
to
know.
it. There's so much
Right,
science
there
to
is.
it.
There is. So I have 2 answers to that question. The first is, and I know this is a little insufferable, but I'm a chippy little autodidact and I read a lot. So there's a lot of really, really good books out there and a lot of like resources that are easily available to anybody who looks for them. The second answer to that question is, I don't actually need to, like, I have a cursory familiarity with soil science, but I don't actually need to know all the nitty gritty stuff about exactly the like chemistry of cation exchange and all that kind of stuff, because there's this wonderful system called the agricultural cooperative extension. Every university in every state in the United States has a land grant university that receives funding from the federal government to run what are called agricultural extension cooperative extensions, which are extensions of the university that exist solely for technical support for farms in that state. And not just for farmers, anybody, and I mean anybody could call up their local agricultural extension office, and each county of every state has an office, and ask them questions and get advice and resources. And in New Jersey, because Rutgers is one of the most important agricultural research institutions on the planet, we have an extremely robust extension agency. And in fact, the Mercer County Extension Office has the best extension agent of any I've ever met, and I've met a lot. Her name is Dr. Meredith Melendez. She is an absolute state, if not national treasure, and a pillar of the farming community. So if I get a soil test back and I'm like, 6% deficient in boron or something, for example, I can call Meredith and say, Meredith, I don't know what the heck this means. What do I do about it? And Meredith, being the consummate, amazing individual she is, will say, oh, I'll be out at the farm in 20 minutes. No problem. I'll come take a soil sample. She'll come back 3 days later. She'll give me like 6 page, she'll give me like a 1-page concise instruction list of exactly what I need to do. And then 6 or 7 papers citing why. So the other, and then I'm going to amend that. There's a third answer to your question. Soil science is still something that's very much in its infancy, even though it's a science that's over a century old. We are still beginning to understand the complexities of soil and how soil works. I mean, there are things about farming, for example, tomatoes, when they do this thing called cat facing, where if you ever get an heirloom tomato and they have that weird brownish skin on them, if you ask a soil scientist or a plant biologist, why do tomatoes do that? The answer will be, I have no idea. We have a lot of theories, but no definite answers. So I hope that answers that question.
Yes, thank you.
Sure.
Okay. So I don't know if I don't see any questions in the chat. Do you have any more in your chat?
I have not seen any more.
Okay.
But yeah, so again, I'm gonna, just because there was some confusion earlier, one more time, abesacresfarm.com, buy my CSA, give me money. And I will give you delicious produce. And in fact, I should say the pickup point is down the street from the synagogue. So it is very, very easy to get to. It is on Riverside Drive. And the pickup is usually on Saturdays, but if you're picking up, if you're Shomer, you can also pick up on Sundays. It's not a big deal. Yeah, last, any questions?
Is there any more questions? Okay. I want to thank you so much. I am so impressed. I wish I could take credit as a former teacher of yours for how successful you are, and maybe the Shabbos part. I don't know.
I think you can. I'll take
a little bit of credit. That's fine. I am so very impressed. Was so interesting, especially the fact that you incorporated the Jewish aspect. And I mean, I knew that this was the Garden State. I did not know the influence that Jewish farmers had here, and I'm thrilled to learn about it. And I'm looking forward to sampling some of your produce and
Please.
Sauces. So I may show up in Yardley.
Please,
So again,
anytime.
I know we all enjoyed this and learned so much from it. I can't thank you enough for participating. I just want to let everybody know our
My
next
pleasure.
Great Minds Salon is March 16th. Our presenter will be Andrea Gaynor. So look for more information about that one. And again, I just want to wish everybody a happy, healthy, nutritious, get some produce from the farm, happy New Year. And we'll see you again. So good evening, everyone. It's been great to see you. Thank you, Gabe. This was wonderful.